the Conifer Community Church podcast. I am your host for today, Wesley Humes, Pastor Wesley Humes, and I am excited to introduce one of my good friends, the great, the powerful Michael Knowles. Welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Wes. How are you, buddy?
Good. I felt like a little Joe Rogan in that moment. Before we even get into this, I have a quick question. What is it like knowing that Alabama has won its, eighth national title with Nick Saban, that you were statistically as a recruit for Alabama to win a national title in the 3 years that you're there? How does that feel for you as a Alabama fan?
Yeah. In the last 14 years since Nick Saban became coach, there's not a single recruiting class that hasn't won one. So roll Tide.
Oh, my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can hear by his voice, he is not from the great state of Colorado. He is, in fact, down in Columbus, Georgia, currently doing ministry down there. And that's why we have him here on the podcast. Michael, just tell a little people about yourself. We're going to get into the past, present, and future of your ministry. But what's up with you? How did you come to know, where is life taking you up to this point?
Oh, that's a
deep question.
A big question. So I probably have like less than 2 minutes to answer that, right? Well,
around that. As
you've already said, I'm Michael. What to say about myself? So I've been in ministry for the last decade or so, and I'm just trying to figure out how to love kids and love people and show up for them. How to be Jesus in practical ways. And my story is, let me just tell you my story. So my story is I grew up in the home of a preacher. My dad is a pastor and has been my whole life. I was born while he was in seminary, and then we kind of moved around. And and I graduated high school. I went to college, and my dad at that point moved to Columbus, Georgia, where I'm at currently, the pastor. And through a process of events, I withdrew from school and moved home and moved back in with my folks, and became passionate about this city and passionate about seeing just people reached. Because at that point, 2010, Columbus, Georgia had more churches per capita than any U.S. city, but lower church attendance per capita of any U.S. city. And so everybody has seen a church, but nobody goes to church. And it's this real unique dynamic. And so just really passionate about seeing, Bill Hybels one time said that the local church is the hope of the world, and just seeing that become a reality. And so I finished school here at CSU, Columbus State University. And then I worked several summers at camp, which is how I met Wes, and we worked huge camps together.
Yeah, we did.
My boy Kyle Cravens, right? And so
oh my gosh, Flavor Crave, you're welcome on the podcast anytime. We'd love to have you.
For sure. I want in on that one too. And
we'll see if we can make that happen.
So just working camp and man, like just trying to figure out this space that the Lord had created me for. And so the whole story is that when I was 13, I met Jesus at camp one summer and changed my life. And I was taught right from wrong because my dad's a preacher, right? And when I was 13 that night at camp, it went from I couldn't do wrong because I didn't want to get in trouble to I couldn't do wrong because Creator God of the universe was living inside of me. And so the whole thing shifted, and the whole thing changed. And from there, like I felt the Lord call me to vocational ministry and missions, and not really sure what that looks like or how that's going to play out even to this day, because I don't feel like we've maybe necessarily reached that. And then felt passionate about, as I graduated college, to start a church. And so I did a church plant residency program in Tennessee for a year, and then I came back and I worked for my dad's church, and kind of started working with the kids that I'm still working with today. So that was 5 or 6 years ago, and man, just I learned a lot of things and found a lot of things that I'm passionate about, and a lot of things I can talk for way more than 2 minutes about. So, but here we are.
Man. Hey, let's just key in on the kids because we are personal friends. I know some different stuff about you, but what is your because we're here to talk about Good Neighbor Tutoring, your nonprofit that you guys are doing down there in Columbus, Georgia, which is exciting news, and we're going to get to kind of tell the story of that today. And so kind of where did this come from? Like, where did this passion to see the children of God reach their, or just the children of Columbus be reached in this way. Yeah, what kind of excited that passion? I know, tell a little bit about your education experience, background working in the
Sure.
education system there, just to kind of let us see a little bit behind the curtain, if you will.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna start with my education. So, like I said, I was in school in, where I grew up, and then I came here in 2011, and I transferred into Columbus State University. At, prior to that, I had tried a really difficult college major, and so I got here and I was like, let's find something easier. And so I
The
was
road less
successful at that.
traveled, right, Mike? The
Yes.
road less traveled. That's where we're
Well,
going. Just something
the
more that's in
harder
your
one,
lane.
the harder road didn't lead to success. So we backed up and we punted, and so I got here, and so anyway, I landed in a criminal justice major, which was fascinating because it's applied sociology, and
Yeah.
was just trying to graduate, man, to be real honest. And so anyway, in that process, um, I learned sociology and statistics about human behavior and how people interact with each other and things. And so when I encountered this need, I had lots of statistics and things that I had learned in school that I was then empowered with to do something about. I saw the need because of that, even though I never had any idea that this would be useful. And so
So what you're meaning by the need, go into that a little bit. Like, tell us what the need is there, not only but
sure,
worldwide. But yeah, where does that criminal justice and your now that you're in a tutoring program, like how did that cross over?
sure. Well, can I tell you a story about a specific kid?
Oh, we would love to hear it. Please.
So yeah, so we're gonna call my friend Sam, and so I was working for a church. I was working for my dad, um, and they had started to reach at-risk kids, and they were busing kids into the church, and so one of the things that we did was we were fed every time they came in the building. We had 3 and 4 year olds that would get themselves up on Sunday morning and get themselves dressed and get themselves to the van to get to the church, so they could eat. And so it was just kind of that space, and you know that because you can tell when a 3 year old dresses himself, right? And so that was just kind of the space that we lived in, and man, it was great, and just enjoyed that space. And so we did, because we were good Baptists. We had Sunday morning Sunday school, we had Sunday morning church hour, and then we had Wednesday night Bible study hour, right? And so we had 3 unique Bible lessons we were doing a week.
All the programming. I also have to ask a quick question. How many Batmans did you ever have show up around Halloween time with the 3-year-olds dressing themselves? Any good
A bunch.
costumes? Okay.
Batman pretty much showed up every week.
That's awesome.
I mean, it happens, and
when a
there's
3-year-old dresses himself,
show up. Yeah, so
you're Batman or Ben Wyatt.
for
If Ben
sure.
Wyatt dresses himself, he's Batman too.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry, I interrupted your story.
You're good. You're good. So anyway, we're doing this. We're reaching these kids, and one day, as I got to know these families over a couple year period of time, and there was this kid, and we're gonna call him Sam, and Sam was one of 5. They all had the same mom and dad, but the older 2, he was the middle one. Older 2 got to stay with dad. Younger 2 got to stay with mom. He was named after his dad. At some point, dad had another child and named him the same name. And so here is this kid that literally is not wanted. He kind of got stuck at grandpa's. And so he's just kind of left out. Very charismatic, very people oriented. Everybody knew this kid. He could walk down the street and tell you everything you want to know about anybody you saw. And so just this magnetic personality. And so here's this kid, Sam, and he's 9 years old. He's going into the 4th grade. And one day at church, he just said, like, man, I can't read. And so we just investigated.
So he's going into the 9th grade, so freshman.
He was
in high
9.
School. Oh, he was 9.
So he was going
okay.
to the 4th grade.
Going into the 4th grade.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that's going to be important in a second. And so he's in the 4th grade and he can't read. So here is where all of those things that I learned in school come into play. So I learned things like the school to prison pipeline. I learned things like that reading levels, your literacy level and reading scores can almost predict whether you're going to end up incarcerated or not. And so you learn these things, and you learn that you can't read in the fourth grade. The chances of you graduating high school are very, very slim. And so if you don't graduate high school, the chances of you being involved in a life of crime, selling drugs, or in a gang are significantly increased. Like the last numbers I saw said 3.5 times a high school graduate. And so that's the likelihood that this kid has. And one of the scariest statistics I've ever learned was that the average life expectancy in 2015 of a gang member in the U.S. was 16 to 18 years old. So here's this 9-year-old who has lived half of his life, minus somebody loving Jesus enough to step into his world and do something about it. And so we call ourselves Good Neighbor Tutoring because of Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10, this guy comes to Jesus, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. And in short, the Good Samaritan story is there were these guys walking down the road and they saw a need, and 2 of them stepped past it, and one said, man, I'm going to do something about it. Yeah. And so he did something about it. It doesn't say that he was a doctor or a nurse or had any experience in bandaging wounds. It doesn't say he was a transportation expert. It doesn't say he had any kind of gifts to that. He just saw a need and he met a need. And so here I was, and I saw a need, man. And so then it was like, okay, so how do we help and teach Sam how to read? Well, we couldn't isolate him and make him be the only one.
Yeah.
And so, because then he would feel left out and ostracized. And so then he would revolt against reading, right? And so we took our Wednesday night church hour and we just said, we're not going to teach anything, and we're going to help with homework. And so we just, like, if you'll bring your homework to church, we'll have adults here that are ready that will help you complete your homework every week. And so that was where it started. And then, so it has shifted a little bit just because of if they don't bring homework, do they get to sit out? And so we had to start providing some supplies for tutoring. But so we call it tutoring, and that's technically what it is. But we don't do a whole lot of, like, pre-calc tutoring. We don't do any of that, actually. Well, what we're doing is we're focused on basic literacy, math, reading, and writing. Because if you can read, you can write, and you can do math, man, you can figure out all the sciences, and you can figure out all these other things. And so the adding, subtracting, the reading, and the writing, because if you take those out, man, like the first question we asked was, you don't have to be able to read to follow Jesus, but how much harder is a relationship with Jesus when you can't practice the basic spiritual discipline of reading your Bible? Right? Like, you just had a question about something I said, so you pulled your Bible out, and it was like right there, right? And so, like, you had that ability. But if you don't have that ability, like, that's just not in the cards for you. And so how do we step in that space?
Yeah, because I think one of the interesting things that we can kind of take from this as well is what Scripture even says about the 2 other people that passed by. Luke chapter 10, verses 31, a priest happened by down the same road, and he passed on the other side. 32, so too did a Levite. And if my Bible history is reminding me, a Levite would have been a tribe of Israel that was known as the priests. So that would have known about the law, even as a Jewish man, knowing that he should help his neighbor. But then it was the Samaritan, like you said, that put over. And so it wasn't the priest. It wasn't the person who was supposed to, but it was somebody who was least expected to step into those roles. And I think that's really powerful, because a lot of to our audience, most of you are not in full-time ministry. And, me, I have the privilege of getting to do that here at Confer. But it's really cool, Mike, that you saw that need and began to step to it. So how do we, okay,
let me
keep
call
going.
Time out there. Something that I want to press in what you just said is if you look at the context of that story, this ruler, Jesus has come to talk to Jesus, and he says, like, what do I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, I love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, okay, who is my neighbor? And so then Jesus tells this story. So Jesus is addressing this ruler, this lawyer, this guy that should know the law, with people like him. But Jesus does it in such a merciful way. Like, I think a lot of times we throw shade at the 2 guys that walk past him. And Jesus doesn't do that. because matter of fact, Jesus is so merciful in the story. The guy has the whole conversation at the end. Jesus says, okay, so who was the neighbor? And the guy can't even bring himself to say the Samaritan. He says the one that had mercy. And so like he's getting mercy because he's experiencing mercy. And so oftentimes when I read that passage of scripture, like I want to say, oh, like Jesus got him, like he pushed him in the mouth, right? And so like, because that's like the guy Jesus I want to read sometimes, or my bias into it.
No,
but that's not what happens in that passage of scripture. And so I think a lot of times we feel condemnation for a place that we saw a need and we didn't engage, and there is no condemnation in that story from Jesus.
Yeah,
like Jesus is not throwing stones in that story. Jesus is calling us to a higher level, but understanding that it's a process and we're not going to be perfect. So anyway, for anybody that's listening that may feel like in that moment of, oh, I walked past somebody, man, that's great. Like you got next time.
Yeah, I think I love that because of the fact of, there are many other places we could go in scripture if that's what this podcast was about how Jesus does put people in their place and does say like, hey, this is what's going to happen, and then shellac across the face. But I love how you brought that in, Mike. I think that's really cool. So we kind of have addressed this need. We see that the literacy of children in the third grade is how they, that stat you shared with us. Their reading level determines, their correctional facility and whether they're going to see some time incarcerated. And I think that's really, really powerful, because I know for me, when you told me that, and kind of one of the things that sparked me wanting to get you on this podcast was this idea that this need and this thing that you guys are doing here is so powerful. So yeah, how did Good Neighbor kind of come out of that? You started doing this on Wednesday nights, and then how did it keep rolling? How did we see the current momentum to where you are now?
Sure. So we had a children's ministry team, and they were all on board. And matter of fact, most of those people are still with me today. And we are wrapping up this year our fourth full school year of the tutoring program.
Hey, go ahead. Let's give it up for you one good time. Come on, man. Congratulations.
They're an incredible team. I don't get to do what I'm doing right now without them.
Hey, shout out to the team.
Absolutely. They're awesome. And so, so the team and we sat down and we said, like, how do we do this? And so there were some key recruitments of people like, hey, I know this person that runs a tutoring program, or I know this person that's an educator, and pulling them in and asking their opinions. And so, so what Good Neighbor is, let me tell you who we are, and then we can keep talking about what we do. So Good Neighbor Tutoring exists to show people Jesus by how we show up and show them love. That's our statement. Okay. And so, and then like I'd like to paint this word picture a little bit, that if you imagine, I don't know if y'all have these in Colorado, but in the South, we have picnic shelters, right? And so, like, you have this place where you go outside and you grill and you hang out. Y'all have those out there?
Ladies and gentlemen, let him know about Flying J if you ever find him online. Y'all know what he's talking about. It's just right at Flying J, man. We got you. We have barbecues, cool. Okay. Except we're probably having eggplant, not chicken, just so you know.
We're having, like, ribs. So
we're having chicken.
That's where we're going.
Chicken and eggplant.
Okay, to each their own. So I don't know if I've ever had grilled eggplant. But anyway, so there's this picnic shelter, okay, and that is the umbrella of Good Neighbor, right? So that's Good Neighbor. And then what holds that up are four pillars, one on each corner, right? And so the four pillars that we have are spiritual formation. If we are not introducing people to Jesus and helping them walk with him, everything else we do, even if it's a success, is a bust, right? Like even if we're able to see grades improve and kids stay out of jail, like it's a bust. And then number two is we want to meet physical needs. Oftentimes, as you read the New Testament, before someone taught, they met a need, right? And so that was kind of how Jesus approached it. Oftentimes when Paul would go to a new city or a new church, he would take an offering from another church, right? And so he would go and then he would teach. And so just this idea that stepping in those places. And so our tagline for that is, we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a practical way. So,
yeah, and I think that's so cool that you guys are doing that, especially with kids, because if you have been around the school system, you've heard about how, there are some kids that are super less fortunate, even here in America, where the only time they're eating a meal is actually at lunch at school. And so for you guys to also see that and say, hey, we're here to show you Jesus, and we're also here to fill your bellies, it's super cool, man. So what's the last two?
So, well, I'm gonna call a time out there. Like, one of the things that is like a core value to us. So in March we shut down, like most of the world, and so from March to July, we did not meet in person. But every week we delivered food. So there are actually 3 weeks last year we didn't deliver food to our kids. We didn't feed the hot meal, which was spring break here, which was our first week of shutdown in Georgia, because our school system had really stepped in and provided hot meals every day, all day. And then we didn't do food the Wednesday before Thanksgiving or the Wednesday between Christmas and New Year. And so those were the only 3 weeks of all 2020 that we did not deliver a hot meal. And so again, great team that did it, that prepared it and did all the things, just because that is something we're passionate about, is seeing not only spiritual hunger, but physical hunger, right? And so our third pillar is academics. We've already covered a little bit, but math, reading, and writing, the basic literacy. And because that's where we started, but that's still a core for us. And then the fourth one is life skills. Okay. And so life skills is this, a little bit harder to define space.
Yeah.
And so there's several categories for life skills. And so one is the places that the school system just isn't teaching, like how to check the oil in your car, or your tire pressure, or how to balance your checkbook, or grocery shop, things.
Yeah, because I think that was kind of leading me into a question of asking, I know you're dealing with a lot of children now, but with the blessing of the Lord and the hope of the prosperity that the Lord has shown you in these last 4 years, maybe you have a kid who's starting to maybe go up into his teens and maybe starting to do high school. Does that mean that you guys are still walking alongside him or her,
Yes.
as they are moving outside of the quote unquote kids age group?
Yeah. So we, so right now our oldest kids, they all started when we started 4 years ago, they're all in elementary school, right? And so we have two now that are in their 8th grade year. And so in the fall, they'll be in high school. And they're still walking with us. Yeah. And so as they become competent in these literacy skills, we're now plugging them in as volunteers, right? And so they have established, and so now they're getting to help set up, or help participate, or help serve, or those kind of things. And so they are still a part and still receiving help when they need it. But now they're able to they've been blessed so they can be a blessing. Is that kind of the mentality that we want to instill?
Yeah. Are you also allowing them to help do the tutoring aspect, or be an assistant or something like that? Because I know in a lot of the
space that they can,
Yeah, because in a lot of the education models, isn't it shown that if you were able to teach somebody, it is more willing to stick with you within that, being able to learn and teach, being able to teach it back. I know whenever I was a substitute teacher, that was something I tried to incorporate with the different lessons. It's all right, pretend I don't know anybody or know anything about this. What would you teach me? And I would let the kids try and do stuff with that. So
sure, and that's fair. I don't know that that's ever been the thought process.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I went a different direction.
No, you're fine. The thought process is much more for me that there's still a place for you, and you still have a part to play. And so you have been helped, and now you get to go help. Right? That's the gospel. The gospel is that while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. Now I get to go lay my life down and show love that way, right? Like Jesus said in John. So this idea of, okay, so you've received mercy, go show mercy, and these scriptural ideas that okay, so this kid has succeeded, has excelled, and is doing better, and so we're no longer working on basic literacy, he's, they're doing whatever, and so how about you come back now and you give what was given to you, but that also establishes value in that person, right? And so instead of it just being you're somebody that always needs help, now you have something to give. And if we can start conveying that mindset of when we get to victim mentality, we get stuck.
Mm.
Everybody's out to get me. But the way to get out of victim mentality is to say, like, I have something to give. I have value. And we as people all have intrinsic value, because Genesis chapter 1:26 says, God said, let us make man in our image. And then verse 27 says, in his image he created them, right? Our intrinsic value is in us because we're in the image of God. And so it doesn't matter who you come across, whether it's that despised Samaritan, or it's the guy in the ditch, or it's Sam, or it's your sitting senator, whoever it is, like, they have intrinsic value, not because of what they've contributed or given to you, but because of whose image they are created in. And so when we can start speaking to that value, when we can start speaking to, you have something to offer, man, like, that empowers people. That encourages people. Like, that is life-giving to people. And so, like, let's do that. So back to life skills. Now that I'm done preaching on that topic.
No, you're fine. I just want to reiterate again, guys, this is Michael Knowles, Good Neighbor Tutoring. So the first 3 pillars were formation,
spiritual formation, meeting physical needs,
and
academics.
Okay, so we're back on life skills.
So the first part of life skills is the places where the school system is not meeting those needs, and just because it can't. And then I think the teachers are great. I love teachers. They're doing an incredible job. But there are just some things that, like, not every kid takes shot, right? And so they're not going to learn some certain things. And then the second space is for me. So I can only speak for me, right? And for me, I was homeschooled. And that makes
no wonder you're weird. No wonder you're weird. It's okay.
So
I got a lot of homeschool kids.
I tried to drop out of school, and my parents wouldn't let me, right? Like, I was not about education. I was not about it. I didn't enjoy it.
Wow.
It was miserable until I got to college, and I found something I was passionate about learning about. And I gave all of my time and energy to learning about that thing. So what does it look like if we can help kids understand what they're passionate about, what they like learning about? Because everybody has that space where they like learning about it.
Yeah.
But it's not the same for anybody. And so help them find that place, that instead of being 22 and finding that, and now spending 10 years and being 32, like, what if you taught them at 10 and then they spent 10 years, like, they spent half their life doing it? Like, just, they would be better educated, right? And so, so then that space. So then the next space, so I call them A, B, C, and D, right? So there's A, and that's B. And then C, there's a study out that I read recently, and it says that it takes 17 adults to pour into one kid's life for that kid to be able to develop and be healthy and successful.
Yeah.
And 17 to 1 is a high ratio.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a lot of adults.
Because the Fuller Institute put it out that they specialize in youth ministry. For those that are unfamiliar, they say it's 5 to 1. So, like, 5 adults have influence on one child as well. So, no, it's just not the parents, I think, is what we're basically coming to. But yeah, keep going.
But if you're an at-risk kid and you have less than 2 parents in the home, you're already at a deficit, right? And so,
absolutely.
I was at a education conference in the spring of 2019, and the number they told us, they said in 2019, 70% of all children born in the U.S. will be born to single moms. 70%. Like, that is a staggering number, right? And so like, those are who we're after, and those are the people that we're encountering in society, and so they're already behind. And so how do we create space to do that, to bring in more people to love on these kids? And so the final step would be to just, I believe that we live in the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
However, if you live on one street and have the same neighbors your whole life and never go anywhere else, you don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
And so you can have this idea of how you're going to better your life, but you don't know. And so the numbers are for us that I think the idea that everybody kind of sees is athletics, right? And so the basic statistics are 2% of all high school athletes play in college, and less than 0.5% of collegiate athletes play at the next level.
Yeah.
So the chances of you doing that are not great. And truth is, I don't know statistics on any other occupation, welding or mechanics or art or graphic design or music. But if your horizons are brought into enough places, eventually you're going to find your 0.5% that God has wired you and designed you for intentionally for the good of the world and the expansion of the kingdom. And so how do we begin to bring those people in and broaden horizons so that our kids, these kids that we're working with, can see those opportunities?
Yeah, that's super cool.
So that is the life skills piece. That is, I think I talked as much for that one as I did all the rest of them.
You know, it's okay, but I think what you're hitting on is this intrinsic need, not only for these at-risk kids, but even for our kids in Conifer, for parents that are listening to this, is what does it look like for us to open up opportunity for them to see and to experience and to be a part of so many different types of things? Because I have kids in my own youth group right now who are like, yep, athletics is my way. And it's like, maybe it is. And yes and amen. And if that happens, that's great. And then I get to say how I was your youth pastor when you're rich and famous. But there's also a reality that if it's welding, if it's ranching, if it's, being a ski instructor, like, you can still be the best at what you want to do. But finding it and just like understanding that even you change, like look at Michael, for example. Michael started out as, a much harder path and then went to criminal justice and now was an educator. And now, God bless America, is, God bless him, is running a nonprofit as he's doing this along the road in his 32 years. And so I think what you're also encouraging, not only for those kids, but for our kids here in Conifer, is to say, hey, what does it look like to broaden our horizons? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Sweet.
And so I think the call is what need do you see?
Yeah.
Right? Like if we're the Good Samaritan and we're walking down the road, like, what need are you seeing? I firmly believe, Wes, that the Lord allows you to see the need that he's calling you to step into.
Yeah.
And so, like, he's sovereign and he's God and he's in control, right? And I think he puts us in places and times at certain points in our life where we can step into place and fulfill who he has called us to be, the uniqueness that he has given us, that intrinsic value that he has already set in us in his image. And one of the things that I like to point is, okay, so I'm holding my fingers up. I have 10 unique fingerprints, right? Like, no one in the history of the world, the hundreds of billions of people that have lived at this point in history, have had any of the 10 fingerprints that I have. Fun fact, you also have 10 unique toe prints. I don't know why, but you do. Okay, and so
it's because you and me are from the South, and that's how we learn to count.
Sure. Okay, so like if you look at your fingerprints, they're all circles, right? So there's some variation of this circle formula that the Lord has given us intentionally.
Yeah.
And if he gave me 10 unique fingerprints, he gave that kind of creative effort to my hands, right? Like if I lose my fingerprints, it doesn't change who I am.
Yeah.
How much more intentionality and creativity and effort did he give to my personality and my talents and my strengths and my passions that make me who I am?
Yeah.
Like, he designed that on purpose. Like, it was intentional. And so he has done that for everybody that's ever lived. And he somehow decided that this today is the right time for Michael and Wes to be alive, right? For what he has us to do for the kingdom and for the relationship that he wants with us, this is the time. And so there is a need. There's probably a need that you have seen that is the space that the Lord is asking you to step into or wants you to step into, that will develop that relationship with him. And so then it's freeing, right? Like, so then it's not like you're just walking around looking for the people dying in a ditch. Like, that's a pretty morbid calling, but it's this place that you become passionate and you talk so much about what you're doing that like your buddy from Denver is like, hey, you should come talk and let me film it, right? And so like,
that's why we're here.
Yeah, and so what are those spaces? And so I think all that to say, like, the kids in Conifer are different than the kids in Columbus. They're not really. They have the same basic needs of all people, right? But you live in a mountain town and I live in a valley, right? And so you live in the Rockies and I live by a polluted river, and so like there are some differences. And like 150 million Americans saw snow this week. We haven't seen freezing temperatures, right? And so like, and we're not in Florida, so that's where we live. Right?
Okay. Gosh, that's funny. But yeah, so let's talk about this need, because I think that's where we're moving to in this conversation is what is the need? What is the future? What does it look like if you were able to have a conversation with God and you said, God, hey man, love you. I know you're in control, but this is a good plan. I think if you needed an advice, that's what I like to tell God. It's like, hey, if you wanted a suggestion, here you go. 9 times out of 10, actually every time it's been thrown back in my face. But hey, what does that need look like for you guys? And I guess in a broader sense is what is a conversation we can have here as we see needs here in Conifer that how would you encourage people to step into it just like you did? And you can answer one or the other or both.
Just go for it. Like, so here we are finishing our 4th full school year. And I don't know that I know what I'm doing yet. I know lots of things that you shouldn't do, right? And so,
yeah, that's fair.
That's what I've learned, and and the mistakes and the things that we've done, but at the same time, so I say that, but you cannot turn a ship around in a harbor.
Yeah. And
so you have to start moving to be able to course correct. If you're not on a course, you can't course correct. And so like, what is that step? Like, and just take that step and like it's important that it's not about us, right? It's not like, oh yeah, we did it, good job, pat ourselves on the back, right? So but there's a need, and so we're stepping into that place in love and truth and grace and wanting to be a part of the solution. So I would say, man, like, if you see a need, stepping into it and maybe doing something wrong, or maybe making a misstep. I don't want to say doing something wrong, but making a misstep or missing it a little bit is okay.
Yeah.
Because at least you did something.
Yeah. And also, I think there is that space of understanding, like Habitat for Humanity, Red Cross, whatever the nonprofit, Naomi Wright Ministries, like whatever you want to call the nonprofit that you work with or closely associated with. Like another one here in Denver is next door. Or Dry Bones, and any of these different things, they started out with one person seeing a need and stepping into it, and then it grew. Or it can also be like similar to where you guys are at in your story, where it's like, hey, we're affecting a number of kids here in Columbus, and that is good, and that is satisfying, and that is what the Lord has called us to.
Yeah.
So
I think the part of the story that we're at this point is what we're currently doing. And so what our current good neighbor looks like is we have a partnership church that allows us to use space. And so on Wednesday night, we have our cook come in and he cooks a full hot meal. And so at 5:15 to 5:45, we eat. At 5:45 to 6:05, 6:10, we have like a worship time where we sing, and then we have a lesson. And so for 2021, we're looking at the attributes of God. And so we're looking at the 21 attributes, 10 moral, 10 unique, and 11 moral attributes of God, and then how they apply to us. So like last week was that God is unchanging, and because God is unchanging, I'm secure, right? That he can't change. He can't change how he loves me. He can't change that he forgives me. All these things are secure in him, and so then I'm secure because I'm in him. And so we're walking through that because that is a significant need, and I think in everybody's life. Genesis 1:26, we already quoted that. We're made in God's image. Genesis chapter 3, the very first temptation attack that the enemy launches against mankind is what God said about you true. And so the very first thing that the enemy attacks is our identity. And so if we are not confident, and listen, friends, if it worked against man and perfection, we don't have a shot, right? Like
yeah,
I'm woefully under equipped to handle that. But these attributes of God and how they line up and what they mean for me is great. And so that's what we do. And then we spend the rest of the time from 6 to 6:05, something like that, to 7 o'clock in our tutoring area and our homework help space. All but 1 week a month. 1 week a month, we're doing a life skill event, and so we bring somebody in and like have them teach a skill or develop something in us. And so last month, January, our cook came in and he said, if you can cook rice, you won't starve to death. And so he taught us how to cook rice and how to fry it. And so it was super cool.
Cheap.
Yeah.
And rice is cheap.
We got to participate in that. The kids got to cook it and make it and then eat it. It was great. And so in February, so it's coming tomorrow. I have a friend who's a drug counselor, and she's going to come share her story about how she got involved with drugs and how she got clean and what she wishes someone had told her in elementary school.
Yeah.
And so she's going to like reclaim some identity things. And so just like trying to create those spaces for that. And so every week we hit 3 of our 4 pillars, right? And so we're meeting physical needs, we're spiritual formation, and either we're doing academics or we're doing life skills. And so we're hitting 3 of the 4 every time we gather.
Nice.
So that's the present. But what I know about that is man, we've seen great success. The Lord has blessed and used. But if we have kids for 2 hours one night a week, that means 6 nights a week they're still in the street and they're still running the streets and they're still unsupervised and they're still able to do whatever and get in trouble. And so one of our goals this year, the board and I have sat down and talked about is how to be in more than one location, more than one night of the week by the end of 2021. Nice. And so I don't not know what that looks like. Ultimately, our long-term goal is to be 5-day-a-week after-school programs and be citywide and to be engaging in those needs all over the place. You know, I think this is a significant need, that literacy and love and identity, all these things are incredible needs that we have everywhere we go. You know, I was doing some research this week and I was reading about a guy named Robert Rakes. And Robert Rakes in the 1700s, he is the pioneer of what we call Sunday school. And so in 1780, he started his first Sunday school because it was in Britain and targeting like factory kids that worked in the factories and couldn't go to school. They were poor and uneducated and illiterate. And so he started bringing them in on Sundays and educating them in basic literacy, math, reading, and writing. And through that, in his lifetime, he had 1.25 million kids come through his program.
Yeah.
That's a staggering number. Like, I don't know that.
1.25 million.
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 Yes.
Praise Jesus, I spelled that right because they might have revoked my degree. No, that's wild. And so is there a space? I mean, it's not a number, but like being citywide, you know, because when we talked about it when you worked in youth ministry, I think one of the things that you told me, which was so incredible, was what would it look like if people were moving to a city because they knew that their kids wouldn't be bullied? And I guess another question that we can talk about here is what would it look like if people were moving to Columbus, Georgia, because they knew their kids would have opportunity? What would it look like for our kids in the kids in Columbus to have opportunity that outweighs even what the resources that they can afford or not afford? Because you were, you know, in your movie, you talked about, or on your Facebook page, if you want to go check out more about Michael and his ministry, it's at Good Neighbor Tutoring on Facebook, pretty easy to find. Was that they offer all of these service completely free to the community. And so, just kind of walk us through some of those things of like what maybe it could look like to see the opportunity for these kids to move into this like next arena.
Sure. Well, there's a there was a study done in 2015 by the federal government, and it said that 85% of all families in the U.S. would have their kids in an after-school program if one was available, affordable, and accessible.
Hmm.
That what that study says to me is that 85% of all families in the U.S. kids aren't in an after-school program, and so there are plenty of kids that idle hands are the devil's playground, right? And so there's plenty of kids that this is a need for. I think, man, to answer the question, I think we as the church need to be involved in places where kids are underprivileged and overlooked.
Hmm.
I think one of the things that helps me get there is the most often given command in all the scripture is
Yeah.
do not be afraid. The second most often given command in all of the scripture is take care of widows and orphans.
Yeah.
And that is a place that I feel like we're not stepping into effectively as effectively as we should. And so now I think that looks different for us in Georgia than it may in Conifer. Matter of fact, today I was looking at a statistic for this that says in the school year of 2017 to 2018 school year in Georgia, there were 39,500 kids that at some point in that school year were homeless.
Wow.
39,500 kids. Now, in the state of Colorado, that number for that same school year was only like 900 kids, right? And so that may not be as significant of a need, but still 900 homeless kids is a significant need, right? And so
Yeah, it is.
I think long term for us, if we're walking through need, as we see a need and then stepping into that need, I think that's a need that the Lord may be asking us to step into. That's a need that I'm seeing that I don't know how to get around at this moment. Of how do we start engaging those 39,000 students, those 40,000 students a year that at some point are homeless, and so how do we encourage them and come alongside them and love them in that place and take care of them and anyway, and so how do we take care of widows and orphans? Like how do we do that effectively? How do we look out for the oppressed and the persecuted and the overlooked and the pushed down? The outcasts. Like those are the people that Jesus went after, and I think that is the core. Like that is at the heart of Christianity. Is while we were still on the outside, while we were still enemies of God, like He came after us. God who was in heaven became a man and dwelt with us, right? John 1:14. And so He put on flesh and He became one of us so that we could see the glory of God. And so what if that was our approach as the church? What if we decided that we were going to be Christ-like so that people around us, the outcast, the overlooked, the oppressed, could see the glory of God through us?
Wow.
We would change the world, bro.
Yeah, because I forget who says it, but it was one of those quotes where it was like the church is a sleeping giant or something like that. Like if all of the church mobilized, we would see a giant of a revolution that could happen. But I guess one
Lord,
question I want to have.
revival.
Yeah, come on, rain down. Send us a revival. I guess one thing, I'm going to give you a second to think about it. Your concluding thought, concluding message you want to leave us with. For those of you that are interested, continue to check back in with this podcast. We're going to have some other nonprofits and Pastor Lance having some conversations coming up soon. Know that that's a part of this. And so, yeah, Mike, as we are kind of closing out, I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is this question is, what is the need? And like you said about the winter storms, here at Conifer, we do a lot with our wood ministry, but where is each one of us, and this is an internal question for you as a listener, where are each one of us seeing a need that we can step into? Because we can't take money, we can't take our houses, we can't take all these things when we die, but we can affect those around us. And that age-old question, I forget who asked it, but it was, I read it. I know I've read it in whenever I'm reading about Diedrich Bonhoeffer right now. It's like, would the community even notice if we had left, if the church closed
Mm.
down? And so, yeah, just seeing the way that he affected Nazi Germany has just inspired me to, what we're doing and what I'm doing currently. So, yeah, any concluding thoughts for you, Mike?
Yeah. So stepping into whatever this looks like, being a part of this, I feel like the Lord has shown me how He's gifted and wired me for His kingdom, in a way that attending church and attending Bible study and even like personal time in the Word had never done. But stepping into it has like shown me that uniqueness that He's wired me with, and so I think for lots of people that's the missing step in our purpose is let's just get active, like just find a cross-centered cause and be a part of it. And man, if it's not you, like you're like, you're like you're coming to tutoring and you're like, I just want to punt babies. Just like that's not your spot. Like that's not your spot. Maybe you need to go chop some wood. Like maybe that's what you need to go do. Or if you're risk adverse, there may not be, you may not want to step into a real risky ministry, but there is a ministry for you. So Columbus, Georgia has somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 people.
Okay.
And we have more than 4,000 nonprofits currently operating in Columbus. And so there are all kinds of places, there are all kinds of needs being met. You just got to go find them, right? And so how you find out about them is you sit down and talk to somebody, like, oh, like, hey. And so if you get plugged in, so that would be my encouragement is, man, just like find somewhere to plug in with no
your
shame.
passions.
Well, that's where you'll find your passion.
Yeah.
You may step into something and it's just not you, and that's okay. There is no harm in saying, man, that's not for me. I'm gonna go find somewhere else that's me. And because you're trying to be who God created you to be, and I believe He ultimately blesses that and rewards that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, hey, Mike, thanks for stopping by with us. For those of you who've made this long, thank you for spending the last 40, 50 minutes with us. We are excited for what you're doing at Good Neighbor. And if you're looking to get involved with Good Neighbor, go to their Facebook page. It is Good Neighbor Tutoring on Facebook. And so love to see your prayers, man. Thanks for stopping by and being with us. All right, everybody, we'll see you. Absolutely, Mike. You're a guest of the friend of the program, guest of the program. Anytime I need you to come on and talk theology, we're going to give you a call and you have to come on because,
Deal.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for stopping by. Goodbye, everybody. And we'll see you next time.